The xenobiology classroom aboard Galactic Academy Station hummed with the quiet energy of dozens of different species settling into their seats. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the various atmospheric preferences, creating gentle currents that carried the mixed scents of ozone, methane, and photosynthetic compounds. Professor Veltar glided to the front of the classroom, her four graceful arms moving in synchronized patterns as she arranged her teaching materials. The tall, blue-skinned educator from Centauri Prime had taught xenobiology for over 2 decades, but she still felt excitement at the start of each new semester. Today's class represented 15 different star systems, each student bringing their own unique perspective on interspecies relationships. "Welcome to your final project presentation day," she announced, her melodic voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic dampeners. "Today, each of you will share something very special with your classmates." Around the room, students shifted in their specially designed seats. Kethra, an insectoid being from the Rigel system, clicked her mandibles nervously. Her crystalline wings caught the artificial sunlight streaming through the observation ports, casting rainbow patterns on the walls. Beside her, Zixna from the Vega colony swayed gently, her translucent body pulsing with soft bioluminescence that indicated curiosity. "Your assignment," Professor Veltar continued, "is to present your species' most beloved companion animal. This project will help us all understand the beautiful bonds that form between sapient beings and the creatures they choose to share their lives with." Excited chatter immediately filled the room in a dozen different languages and communication methods. Kethra's wings vibrated with pleasure as she spoke to her neighbor about the singing crystal moths her people kept. These tiny creatures created harmonious melodies that could soothe even the most troubled mind, their songs shifting in response to their keeper's emotional state. Zixna described her family's photosynthetic companions, small plant-animal hybrids that grew in beautiful spiraling patterns and glowed softly in the dark. They required no feeding, simply absorbing starlight and carbon dioxide while providing oxygen and gentle illumination for their homes. Near the back of the classroom, 3 students from the Altair system discussed their cloud dancers, ethereal beings that existed partially in normal space and partially in subspace dimensions. These creatures bonded with a single person for life, creating spectacular light displays that reflected their owners' dreams and aspirations. James Mitchell sat quietly among his alien classmates, listening to their descriptions with growing interest. The human exchange student from Earth had been at the academy for 6 months, but he still found himself amazed by the diversity of life throughout the galaxy. His datapad lay open before him, stylus poised to take notes, but he found himself more focused on understanding what his classmates considered normal pet behavior. "Professor," James raised his hand, his voice cutting through the multilingual chatter. "When you say companion animal, could you clarify the parameters you're looking for?" Professor Veltar's large, dark eyes focused on him with interest. The human students were always asking such thoughtful questions, approaching problems from angles that often surprised her. "Of course, James. We're looking for the typical household companions your species keeps for emotional support, entertainment, or simple companionship. You know, the small, gentle creatures that bring joy and comfort to daily life." James nodded slowly, making a note on his datapad. Around him, other students continued sharing stories of their diminutive, harmless pets. The beings from Proxima Centauri spoke of their thumb-sized dragons that breathed flower petals instead of fire. The aquatic representatives described their schools of rainbow fish that swam through their underwater cities, creating living murals of color and movement. "Are there any size restrictions for the presentations?" James asked, looking up from his notes. Professor Veltar tilted her head, a gesture she had learned from human body language studies. "Well, we'll be using the standard classroom space, so nothing too large, obviously. Why do you ask?" "Just planning ahead," James replied. He made another note, then looked up again. "Would it be possible to use the Academy's reinforced gymnasium instead of the classroom? For safety reasons?" The question caused a brief lull in the surrounding conversations. Several students turned to look at James with curiosity. Kethra's antennae twitched with interest, while Zixna's bioluminescence shifted to a pattern that indicated puzzlement. "Safety reasons?" Professor Veltar repeated. "James, we're talking about companion animals. They should pose no danger to anyone. That's rather the point of keeping them as pets." "Of course," James said quickly. "I just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable during the presentations. My family's companion might be a bit overwhelming for species that aren't used to larger animals." The professor found his concern touching, though unnecessary. She had heard that humans sometimes kept animals the size of small ponies, which might indeed seem large to species accustomed to pocket-sized pets. I suppose we could arrange for the larger presentation space if needed. Though I'm curious about what kind of companion animal requires such considerations. James smiled, but there was something in his expression that made Professor Veltar slightly uneasy, though she couldn't identify why. She's been with my family since she was very young. Completely domesticated, very well behaved. She's actually quite gentle, considering her background. Her background? Zixna asked, her curiosity patterns brightening. Conservation work, James explained. My family runs a wildlife sanctuary back on Earth. We specialize in caring for animals that can't survive in the wild anymore. This seemed to satisfy most of the class's curiosity, and conversations gradually returned to the excited planning of presentations. Students began making arrangements to bring their companions to the academy, discussing transport requirements and environmental needs. Professor Veltar made a note to prepare the gymnasium space, though she still felt puzzled by James's requests. Humans had such interesting perspectives on animal companionship, often forming bonds with creatures that other species would consider purely utilitarian. She looked forward to seeing what kind of unique relationship James would present to the class. As the session ended and students began filing out, James remained seated for a moment, reviewing his notes. He pulled up his communicator and sent a message to his family back on Earth, requesting that Luna be prepared for interstellar transport. The response came quickly, along with a detailed checklist of environmental requirements and safety protocols that would need to be implemented. James gathered his materials and headed for the door, already planning the logistics of his presentation. This was going to be educational for everyone involved, though perhaps not in the way Professor Veltar expected. 1 week later, the xenobiology students found themselves walking through corridors they had never seen before. Instead of their familiar classroom with its comfortable seating and gentle lighting, they were being directed toward the academy's main hangar bay. The massive space echoed with the sounds of cargo operations and the hum of environmental systems working at full capacity. Emma Rodriguez, a human exchange student from the European Federation, stepped through the hangar entrance and stopped in surprise. The enormous space had been transformed. Specialized barriers created a presentation area in the center, while environmental processes hummed loudly as they worked to maintain specific atmospheric conditions. Military-grade containment fields flickered with energy, their warning lights casting strange shadows across the deck plating. "What in the galaxy is all this?" she muttered, approaching James Mitchell, who stood near what appeared to be a massive environmental containment unit. He wore clothing she had never seen before, thick protective gear that looked more suited for hazardous materials handling than a classroom presentation. James looked up from the control panel he was studying, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool hangar air. "Oh, hi Emma. Just making sure everything is set up properly for my presentation." "James, what exactly are you preparing for?" Emma asked, watching nervously as he interfaced with systems that displayed readings she couldn't begin to interpret. The containment unit behind him was easily the size of a small spacecraft, its reinforced walls thick enough to withstand explosive decompression. Several cargo handlers moved around the setup with practiced efficiency, but Emma noticed they kept glancing at their scanners with expressions of concern. One of them, a grizzled veteran with cybernetic implants, shook his head and muttered something about hazard pay. "I just want everyone to stay safe and comfortable," James replied, adjusting atmospheric processes that were cycling through complex filtration sequences. "My companion needs very specific environmental conditions, and I need to be absolutely certain she doesn't feel stressed during the presentation." His classmate Zixna approached, her translucent form pulsing with patterns that indicated growing anxiety. The gentle being from Vega had never seen such elaborate preparations for a simple pet presentation. "James, exactly how large is this companion animal of yours?" James paused in his work, considering his answer carefully. "She's fully grown. Been with my family since she was just a baby. But don't worry, she's incredibly well behaved. Never had a single incident with visitors." Through the reinforced viewing panels of the containment unit, students caught glimpses of movement within the environmental chamber. Something substantial shifted in the shadows, and the automated systems responded by adjusting temperature and humidity levels. The bioscanners mounted on the exterior displayed scrolling data that made several students step back involuntarily. Kethra's compound eyes focused on the readouts, her insectoid brain processing the information with mechanical precision. "Those biosignatures are registering as apex-level predatory species," she clicked nervously. "James, what kind of sanctuary animal requires this level of containment?" "It's not containment," James corrected gently. It's environmental control. Luna needs to feel comfortable, and the atmospheric mix here is different from Earth standard. The barriers are just to make sure she has her own space during the presentation. Professor Veltar arrived with a group of Academy administrators, their faces showing various degrees of concern and curiosity. The station's chief security officer accompanied them, his hand resting unconsciously on the stunner at his belt. Behind them, maintenance crews worked to reinforce the hangar's emergency systems. Mr. Mitchell, Professor Veltar began, her melodic voice carrying a note of authority James had never heard before. The Academy's sensors are detecting biological signatures that are somewhat concerning. Perhaps you should clarify exactly what type of companion animal you have brought aboard my station. James checked his chronometer and noted that his presentation was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. Around the hangar, his classmates had gathered in small groups, their various forms of communication creating a buzz of nervous energy. Some species were naturally equipped to sense predators, and their instincts were clearly triggering warning responses. Luna is the gentlest member of our family, James said with complete sincerity. She's never shown aggression toward any visitor to our sanctuary. My little sister plays with her every day. The security chief stepped forward, his scanner beeping insistently as he pointed it toward the containment unit. Son, these readings indicate a biological mass consistent with a Class A predatory species. Are you telling me you have a child interacting with something that registers these kinds of threat levels? James smiled, the expression somehow both reassuring and unsettling. You have to understand, humans have a different relationship with dangerous animals than most species. We've been living alongside apex predators for millions of years. Luna isn't dangerous to us because she doesn't see us as prey. We're her family. Inside the containment unit, something moved again, and this time the students got a clearer view. Sleek muscle rippled under orange and black striped fur. Massive paws padded silently across the specially designed flooring. Golden eyes reflected the interior lighting with an intelligence that made several aliens retreat to what they considered a safer distance. Emma stared at the viewing panel in growing recognition and horror. James, please tell me that's not what I think it is. She's beautiful, isn't she? James said with obvious pride. 400 pounds of perfect evolutionary design. Luna represents millions of years of natural selection creating the ultimate hunter. Professor Veltar was frantically checking Academy protocols on her datapad while simultaneously taking fascinated notes. As an educator, she was intrigued by this unexpected development. As a responsible administrator, she was calculating liability scenarios. The hangar fell quiet except for the hum of environmental systems and the occasional sound from within the containment unit. A deep, rumbling vibration began to emanate from the chamber, so low it was felt more than heard. The sound resonated through the deck plating and into the bones of everyone present. She's purring, James explained to the assembled group. That means she's happy. The containment field hummed with energy as James stepped up to the presentation podium. Behind him, the massive environmental unit cast long shadows across the hangar deck. His classmates sat in carefully arranged seating that the security team had positioned at what they deemed a safe distance. Professor Veltar stood near the emergency controls, her four hands hovering over various alert systems. To understand human companion animals, James began, his voice carrying clearly through the hangar's acoustic system, you need to know something about how humans evolved. Most species in the galaxy developed alongside creatures they could easily control or dominate. Humans took a different path. He activated the holographic display, showing images of Earth's vast wilderness areas. Dense forests stretched endlessly, while open grasslands rippled under alien winds. Through the footage, shapes moved with deadly grace, their forms only partially visible in the natural camouflage of their environment. My family has worked with big cats for over 60 years, James continued, the images shifting to show a sprawling sanctuary nestled in mountain valleys. We started when my great-grandfather found an injured mountain lion. Instead of calling animal control, he spent 3 months nursing it back to health. Zixene's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate confusion. James, did you say big cats? How big exactly? James smiled, but his attention was focused on the containment unit's control panel. Earth's big cats range from about 60 pounds to over 600. They're apex predators, meaning they sit at the top of the food chain. Nothing hunts them except humans, and even then, we usually lose. Kethra's mandibles clicked nervously. And your family keeps these creatures as companions? Not exactly keeps, James corrected. We provide sanctuary for cats that can't survive in the wild anymore. Some were injured, others were born in captivity, and a few were rescued from illegal situations. They stay because they choose to stay. The environmental systems cycled through their final preparations, and James moved to the containment field controls. My great-grandfather learned something that changed our family forever. These predators, these perfect killing machines, are capable of love. Real, genuine affection for creatures they could easily destroy. Professor Veltar checked her emergency protocols one more time. Mr. Mitchell, are you absolutely certain this is safe? Luna has never hurt a human being in her entire life, James replied with complete confidence. She's been around children, elderly people, and visitors from dozens of countries. The only thing she's ever been aggressive toward was a burglar who tried to break into our house, and even then, she just sat on him until police arrived. He placed his hand on the field deactivation control. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Luna. The containment field flickered and disappeared. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large, a Siberian tiger stepped into the hangar's open space. The collective gasp from the assembled students echoed off the hangar walls. Luna was magnificent beyond description. Her orange fur blazed with dark stripes that seemed to shift and flow as she moved. She stood nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, her massive frame rippling with muscle that spoke of power beyond most sapient beings' comprehension. Luna's golden eyes surveyed the room with intelligent curiosity. Her gaze moved from student to student, cataloging each new scent and form with the methodical precision of a natural hunter. Several aliens scrambled backward despite the distance between them and the tiger. Others froze completely, their evolutionary instincts screaming warnings about the apex predator in their midst. Emma had gone completely pale, her human heritage giving her an immediate understanding of exactly what they were looking at. James, that's a Siberian tiger. That's the largest cat species on Earth. 423 pounds, James confirmed proudly. And she's still growing. Siberians can reach over 600 pounds in the wild. Luna completed her survey of the room and turned her attention to James. Her massive head swiveled toward him, and she began walking in his direction with a flowing, silent gait that had made her ancestors the most successful hunters in Earth's history. Luna, sit, James said calmly, as if he were addressing a household pet. The enormous tiger settled beside him with regal dignity. Her shoulder reached nearly to James's chest, and when she sat, her head was still level with his. The rumbling purr that had been barely audible in the containment unit now filled the hangar like the sound of a massive engine idling. James reached over and scratched behind Luna's ears, his fingers disappearing into the thick fur around her massive head. The purring intensified, vibrating through the deck plating so strongly that some students could feel it in their feet. This is Luna expressing happiness, James explained to his stunned audience. She's telling me she's comfortable and pleased to see me. Watch this. He moved to stand directly in front of the tiger and placed both hands on either side of her enormous head. Luna leaned into his touch, her eyes closing in contentment. When James rubbed the white patches behind her ears, she pushed against him with enough force to make him take a step backward. Professor Veltar stared in fascination and terror. Mr. Mitchell, that creature could kill half the students in this room without effort. She could, James agreed, his hands still buried in Luna's fur. Her bite force is over 1,000 pounds per square inch. Her claws can cut through steel cables. She can leap vertically 12 feet and run at 40 miles per hour. He looked around at his classmates, many of whom had moved as far from the presentation area as possible. But she won't hurt anyone here, because she doesn't see any of you as threats or prey. To Luna, you're just strange-looking members of my extended family. Luna opened her golden eyes and looked directly at Kethra, who immediately froze in place. The tiger studied the insectoid being with calm interest, then closed her eyes again and resumed purring. She's not a pet in the way you understand pets, James continued. She's family. She chooses to love us, chooses to be gentle with us, chooses to stay with us. And that choice makes our bond stronger than any cage or leash ever could. James walked slowly around Luna, his movements relaxed and confident. The massive tiger's golden eyes followed him with lazy contentment, her enormous head turning to track his position. The purring that filled the hangar never wavered, a deep rumble that seemed to come from the very core of her being. The bond between humans and apex predators isn't about dominance, James explained to his captivated audience. It's about trust. Luna trusts me completely, and I trust her to control her strength around fragile beings like myself. He knelt beside the tiger and placed his hand flat against her massive flank. Luna's breathing was deep and steady, each exhale creating small clouds in the hangar's cooler air. Her striped coat was thick and luxurious, clearly well-maintained and healthy. "Luna, down," James said quietly. The enormous cat shifted her weight and slowly lowered herself to the deck, her massive frame stretching out until she lay on her side. Even lying down, she was an impressive sight. Her body extended nearly 8 feet from nose to tail tip, and her legs were longer than James's arms. Emma watched from the safety of the distant seating area, her hands gripping the chair arms so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "James, what are you doing?" "Something I've done 1,000 times," James replied, moving to lie down next to Luna. He positioned himself against her side, using her massive body as a backrest. Luna immediately adjusted her position, curling slightly so that her head rested across James's legs. The tiger's weight was enormous. Her head alone probably weighed 60 pounds, yet she placed it on James with the same careful precision she might use when stepping over a sleeping kitten. The purring intensified as she settled, the sound now so deep it seemed to resonate in everyone's chest. Professor Veltar found herself taking notes frantically, her scientific mind fascinated despite her terror. "James, how is this possible? Every instinct that creature possesses should classify you as prey." "That's where you're wrong," James said, gently stroking Luna's massive head. "Luna has never known hunger. She's never had to hunt for survival. She was bottle-fed as a cub and raised alongside humans. To her, I'm not prey. I'm pack. I'm family." Luna began grooming James's hair with her enormous tongue. Each lick was gentle but thorough, the rough surface designed to strip meat from bones now carefully cleaning the human who had raised her. Her tongue was larger than James's hand, yet she used it with surgical precision. Kethra's compound eyes focused intently on the display. The grooming behavior indicates strong social bonding. "But how do you manage her predatory instincts?" "Watch this," James said. He pointed toward Zixna, whose bioluminescent patterns were cycling through rapid sequences of alarm. "Luna, look. Friend." The tiger's head lifted immediately, her golden eyes focusing on the translucent alien. Her ears swiveled forward, and her nostrils flared as she processed unfamiliar scents. For a moment, every muscle in her powerful frame was tense and ready. Zixna froze completely, her natural luminescence dimming to almost nothing. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed warnings about the apex predator whose attention she had just attracted. "Easy go," James murmured, his hand resting on Luna's neck. "Friend. Family." Luna's ears relaxed slightly, though she continued to watch Zixna with keen interest. She made a soft chuffing sound, almost like a question, her head tilting slightly as she studied the alien's unusual form. "She's curious about you," James explained to Zixna. "She's never seen anyone like you before, but she's not showing any aggressive behavior. See how her ears are forward instead of back? That means interest, not hostility." The tiger's tail twitched once, then settled back into stillness. Her breathing remained calm and steady, though her attention stayed fixed on Zixna for several more seconds before she turned back to James. "The key is socialization from a very young age," James continued, scratching under Luna's chin. She immediately tilted her massive head to give him better access, her purring becoming even louder. "Luna has been around humans, dogs, horses, and dozens of other species since she was weeks old. She learned that not everything that moves is food." He activated his datapad and projected images onto the hangar's main screen. The holographic display showed Luna as a tiny cub, barely larger than a house cat, being bottle-fed by a young girl who looked remarkably like James. "That's my sister Sarah when she was 12, James explained. "Luna was orphaned when her mother was killed by poachers. Sarah spent every day for 3 months feeding her, playing with her, teaching her how to be gentle." The images shifted to show Luna's growth over the years. In each picture, she was larger, but always surrounded by humans of various ages. Children played on her back while she lay patiently in the sun. Elderly visitors sat beside her on park benches while she dozed contentedly. "Here's Luna at 2 years old," James pointed to an image of the tiger playing with a German shepherd. "She learned bite inhibition from our dogs. Watch how she opens her mouth to play bite, but never actually closes it on anything living." Emma found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "James, your family lets children play with a tiger?" "Supervised, always," James assured her. "But yes. Luna is gentler with children than most domestic animals. She seems to understand that small humans are fragile and need extra care." Another image showed Luna lying on her back while a toddler climbed over her massive belly. The tiger's expression was one of patient tolerance, her enormous paws carefully positioned to avoid accidentally striking the child. Luna shifted position, rolling slightly to expose her belly to James. This was the ultimate sign of trust from a predator, showing vulnerability to someone she considered completely safe. James placed his hand on her stomach, feeling the powerful muscles beneath the fur. "This is what trust looks like," he said to his speechless classmates. 400 pounds of apex predator, completely relaxed and defenseless, because she knows I would never hurt her. Just like I know she would never hurt me. The tiger's golden eyes were half closed with contentment, her breathing deep and regular. In that moment, she looked less like a fearsome hunter and more like an oversized house cat enjoying attention from her favorite human. Professor Veltar set down her datapad and approached the presentation area, her forearms moving in careful, non-threatening gestures. Luna's golden eyes tracked her movement, but the tiger showed no signs of alarm. The massive cat simply watched with lazy interest as the blue-skinned educator came closer. "James," Professor Veltar said, her melodic voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity, "I need to ask you something that has been troubling me throughout this entire presentation. Why do humans choose to form bonds with creatures that could easily destroy them?" James considered the question while Luna stretched beside him, her massive frame extending even further across the hangar deck. Her claws extended briefly during the stretch, each one longer than James's fingers and sharp enough to cut through metal. Yet she kept them carefully positioned away from any living being. "Professor, anyone can love something harmless," James replied, his hand resting on Luna's massive shoulder. "My sister's crystal moths are beautiful, but they couldn't hurt her if they wanted to. Zixene's photosynthetic companions are lovely, but there's no risk involved in caring for them." Luna rolled onto her side, bringing her enormous head closer to James. She began grooming his arm with her rough tongue, each lick careful and gentle despite the fact that the same tongue could strip flesh from bone in the wild. "True companionship isn't about keeping something weak and dependent," James continued. "It's about earning the respect and affection of something powerful that chooses to be gentle with you. Luna could leave our sanctuary anytime. She could overpower any human easily. But she stays because she wants to, because she loves us as much as we love her." Kethra's wings buzzed with nervous energy as she formulated her next question. "But James, how do human children survive around such creatures? Your images showed younglings interacting directly with Luna." James smiled and activated another set of holographic images. These showed Luna in various situations with human children, her behavior clearly modified based on the age and size of each person she encountered. "Luna understands size differences," James explained. "Watch this video of her with my nephew Tommy." The hologram showed a 4-year-old boy stumbling as he tried to pet Luna's head. As the child lost his balance and began to fall, Luna moved with lightning speed. Her massive paw caught the boy gently, steadying him without so much as leaving a mark on his clothing. The precision required for such control was staggering. "She calculates her strength based on who she's interacting with," James said. "With me, she can be rougher because I'm an adult male and can handle more force. With children, she becomes incredibly gentle. It's not training, it's intelligence and emotional awareness." Emma finally found the courage to speak up from her distant position. "James, what about when Luna gets angry or frightened? What happens to all that careful control?" "Good question," James replied. He projected another image showing Luna in an alert posture, her body tense and ready for action. "This was taken last year when someone tried to break into our sanctuary at night." The image showed Luna positioned between the intruder and the main house where James's family lived. Her massive frame blocked the path completely, and her golden eyes glowed with reflected light from the security cameras. The would-be burglar was pressed against a fence, clearly terrified. "Luna didn't attack him," James explained. "She just sat there and waited. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, the man was still frozen in place. Luna never moved, never showed her claws, never even growled. She just made it clear that he wasn't going anywhere." Professor Veltar made rapid notes as she processed this information. "So the predatory instincts are still present, but redirected toward protection rather than hunting." "Exactly," James confirmed. "Luna sees our family as her territory to protect. She's never shown food aggression toward humans because we're not food to her. We're something much more valuable, we're her chosen family." Zixene's bioluminescent patterns had gradually shifted from alarm to fascination as she watched the interaction between human and tiger. "James, you mentioned that Luna chooses to stay. What would happen if she decided to leave?" James was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking Luna's enormous head as he considered the question. "Would let her go," he said simply. "The sanctuary has open boundaries. If any of our cats decided they wanted to try life in the wild, we wouldn't stop them. Love isn't about keeping someone prisoner. Luna lifted her massive head and looked directly at James, making a soft chuffing sound that seemed almost conversational. James responded by making similar sounds back to her. Their communication clearly developed over years of close contact. "She's asking if everything is okay," James translated. "All this attention from strangers is unusual for her. She's checking to make sure I'm comfortable with the situation." The tiger's concern for James's well-being was evident in her body language. She shifted position so that she was partially shielding him from the assembled students, her massive bulk creating a protective barrier while still allowing him to continue his presentation. Professor Veltar realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't just a human keeping a dangerous pet under control. This was genuine mutual affection between two completely different species, based on trust, respect, and emotional intelligence from both parties. "Students," she addressed the class, "today we've learned something profound about human nature. They don't just form alliances with the weak or harmless. They seek out relationships with power, with danger, with creatures that could destroy them. And somehow, they convince these apex predators to love them in return." She gestured toward James and Luna, who had settled into comfortable positions beside each other. This explains much about humanity's success in galactic diplomacy. Any species that can turn apex predators into loving family members possesses a unique understanding of both power and respect. James received the highest presentation marks in Academy history, though several professors quietly updated their course requirements to include specific warnings about human definitions of companion animals. As the semester ended, students from dozens of worlds carried with them a new understanding of why humans were both beloved and slightly feared throughout the galaxy. After all, any species that considered apex predators to be cherished family members was clearly not to be underestimated.